Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Amanda Cicatelli. I will be your moderator for today's webcast presentation hosted by IIR, the Institute for International Research. IIR is the world's largest producer of educational conferences including marketing research. IIR provides this webcast as one of the many educational programs for research and insights professionals. We invite you to participate in our ongoing Insights webinar series, your resource for insights on the cutting edge. Today's webinar is presented in partnership with the ION Women Division at Insights in Marketing, a full-service marketing research consultancy in the Chicago area. ION Women is an Insights in Marketing's team of intensely curious people who are driven to understand the whys behind women's behavior to help clients create breakthrough female marketing. For more information on ION Women and Insights in Marketing, please visit their website at www.insightsinmarketing.com. Before we get started, I always like to answer this commonly asked question. Will I be able to view an archive of this webcast? The answer to this question is yes. As an attendee, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the webcast recording on our website. Today's presentation will be interactive and we encourage you to participate. There will be a live Q&A session at the end of the event. So anytime during this presentation, you can simply type your questions in the text box in the lower left corner of your screen and hit submit. Your questions will be viewed by myself and the presenters and then will be placed in the queue. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presentation entitled Beyond the Age and Life Stage, Using Psychological Profiling to Better Understand Women. Our thought leaders for today are Tanisha Craig, Division Director of ION Women at Insights in Marketing, and Chad Hinkle, ION Women Consumer Behavior Consultant at Insights in Marketing. Recently, both Tanisha and Chad won the prestigious Take the Cake Award for leading the most influential and insightful session at this year's 9th Annual Marketing to Women Conference in Chicago. As founder of Insights in Marketing, ION Women's team, Tanisha has a passion for uncovering insights about her that matter. Tanisha brings clarity and understanding to the many issues that marketers struggle to understand when targeting the female consumer. Leveraging her experience as a research executive at top companies like PepsiCo and Draft FCB, General Mills, and Kraft, Tanisha is an expert at analyzing and synthesizing data to fuel strategy development. Tanisha's 15+ years of experience as both a client and supplier has enabled her to develop a depth and breadth of knowledge across a variety of industries and categories. A true social scientist with a background in psychology, Chad is a critical member of Insights in Marketing's ION Women's team. Chad specializes in employing creative, female-centric research techniques to achieve a bigger picture female consumer understanding. With over 14 years experience partnering with Fortune 500 companies across a variety of industries, including beauty, food and beverage, healthcare, insurance, and more, Chad is an expert in unpacking consumer behavior. He specializes in breaking down complex consumer psychology into simple and actionable directions. So, Tanisha and Chad, why don't you take it from here?
Great. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and we want to first thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us. We want to talk about marketing to women and beyond age and life stage. We really want to provide a snapshot of how we use psychological profiling to better understand women and therefore better develop marketing programs that appeal to women. So hopefully today we'll accomplish a few things. The first, we'll talk about the pitfalls of stereotyping based on demographics. We'll next identify what the real drivers of behavior are. We'll talk about 2 of our 5 psychological profiles that all women fall into. And then we'll demonstrate the value of psychological profiling via a case study. And lastly, we'll provide you with a few tips to help you with your marketing efforts as you think about marketing to women. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we hope to present a clearer view of women to you guys. We want you to be thinking at the end of this how you could do a better job of connecting to the women you market to today. But first, a little bit more about who we are. I think the most important thing to point out on this page is that we're intensely curious people, and we're always looking for the whys behind women's behavior. There's a lot of data that exists to explain the what, but we try to unearth the whys behind women's behavior. And more than anything, we want you to know that she is more than a demographic. Women have told us that her age, her education, marital status, etc., those are great things that describe who she is, but they don't define who she is. Demographics are really good at scratching the surface of who she is, but they don't really tell you a whole lot about her. For example, if you were to look at the pictures of these women, you might immediately think they have nothing in common. Demographically, you're right. But if you were to look at them more holistically, you might find that they have a great deal in common. And as a research professional, we've done a really good job of measuring attitudes, but women are even still telling us that they're more than their responses to specific survey attitude statements. In fact, these insights are useful, but they only scratch the surface of really providing insight into who she is and what really drives her behavior. There's a lot more below the surface of women. And when you consider that 45% of all behaviors are controlled by habit, and so much of her decision-making is unconscious, you really got to know who a woman is at her core in order to really intersect her and make her do something different. We think that's hard for a lot of marketers. With all the data that's available, it can still be difficult to understand what's beneath the surface with women. So we tend to talk about the data sources in a couple of different buckets. There's the stuff that you can measure, typically more demographic or behavioral. I'd say a lot of our big data fits into that category. There's what women will share with you, what she'll tell you about herself. And that's generally what she wants the world to believe about herself. Probably a good quote that you might commonly hear women say is, "I'm fine." But what does that really mean about her? Then there's all the stuff that she may not or cannot openly articulate. It's the stuff that lies below the surface that's not even easy for her to put words together to describe why she does what she does. And that's the stuff that really drives her purchase behavior. And we want to understand that in order to help you guys be better and more effective marketers. And as chief purchasing officers for their home, understanding women is an absolute strategic imperative. So our first question for you guys is, what percent of women would you say agree that marketers are effectively marketing to them? Feel free to pick anywhere between 0 and 10, 11 and 25, 26 and 50, or greater than 50% of women. Just quickly, you can see how the results polled out across the folks on the call. Interestingly, 11 to 25% is where the majority of the votes hit. Let me tell you what women said. Women said that 9% of them agreed that marketers effectively market and sell to them. That's substantially lower than what we as a group just hypothesized they would say. And when you look at it, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you see the percent that agree that you're marketing to me as a person, and then other women. And you'll see that there's a pretty big difference between whether you're marketing to me, my perception is you're marketing to me, or whether my perception is you're marketing to some woman other than myself. So at the end of the day, what's happening is women are hearing marketing messages, and they're not personalizing them. They do not believe your marketing efforts are targeted to them personally. That's a big problem. We thought, well, is it different for moms? And yes, it is, but not much. When you look at the moms who said marketers are effectively marketing to me, only 13% of them agreed. And when you look at boomers, the often overlooked target, you see that they were substantially lower at 7%. So a pretty big disconnect regardless of who you're looking at. Women are saying, you're not effectively marketing to me. And it's no wonder when you look at particularly a lot of new product success or failure rates, it's really a problem. More than 80% of new products fail every year. And we fundamentally do not believe it's because of a lack of good ideas or good execution. That has a little to do with it, and it often impacts whether a product can be successful or not. But we think the biggest issue is that the ideas that are being launched don't adequately connect to her. They're not meaningful enough to her. And for us, this means we need to change the way we connect with women. We've got to move from a conscious model to a subconscious model, And we don't mean any heavyweight, brain scanning. We just mean you need to understand what's below the surface and what drives her and motivates her. We need to move from more of a monologue to a dialogue. We do a lot of talking at our targets and not really a lot of conversing with our targets. We need to move from mass to make it feel more personal. If I believe you've done something just for me, I'm more likely to be engaged and stay engaged. This is going to require us to shift our focus a little bit. Oftentimes we spend a lot of our time focused on what we can make and how we can make it and what technology advances we have. But what she's asking you to think about is more what she wants or what her needs are. And that's often a kind of afterthought in the process. We often spend so much time focused on developing the idea that we think is great that we forget to ask her what she needs or what she wants from us. So how do you do this? It's a pretty delicate balancing act, we believe. We don't want you to forego your business knowledge, your business insight, but we just want to bring more consumer insight to the table. And we think the most important thing to do is to first understand who she is, understand her values, her personality, her habits, because these are the things that really matter. These are the things that shape who women are, and it also shapes what their behavior is in terms of purchasing. These are things that are not easily changed. So if you look at a person for who they are at their core, you're not likely to see them change a whole lot over their lifetime. These are minor changes that you might see in personality and habits and values. But for the most part, if you get and connect with her at a more visceral, subconscious level, you're likely to keep her for a longer period of time. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad to talk about whether we can actually get at this. Chad?
Hi, everybody. Okay, so at this point, our team sat down together and said, all right, let's go back over where we were, where we would like to be, and where we are now. Where we were, as we've seen over all of our careers, that we're having trouble connecting with women. We've used a variety of techniques to try to get there, but we just can't always seem to get to the place where it just clicks. What we want to do is to be able to have a model, something that we can use that will give us the ability to understand that deeper subconscious level with women and be able to explain that easily to any client that wants to come in and work with us. Where we are now is we've uncovered that if we want to understand the subconscious level, we need to understand what makes up this subconscious level. At the deepest subconscious level, the I that a woman will refer to when she says, I like this or I like that, is made up of three big things. Those are her values, her personality, and her habits. By very definition, however, these three things lay in a subconscious layer of who she is. So it got very quiet around the table as we talked about this, and everybody looked at me, and Tanisha said, okay, Psycho Boy, figure out how to do this. After I kind of freaked out for a second, I went back into my office and said, okay, what can we do? How can we make sense of this? What do we need to do moving forward? The answer to the first question, can we accurately measure values, personality, and habits? The answer to that is yes. The how behind that we'll get to in a second. Before we get there, we want to run you through what we actually did in terms of our survey. We wanted to get done, and at the end of having all the data from our survey, be able to say, we have psychologically profiled the American woman. In order to do that, we needed this to be as accurate as possible. In order to do that, we needed to make this as big as we could. So we said, let's start out making this as big to incorporate as much of the American woman into our sample as we possibly can. So we started with age. We said 18 to 67 years old is what we're going to look at in terms of age. We're going to pull from all geographic territory within the United States, and we're also going to pull from different ethnic and cultural groups that make up some smaller groups that aren't always accounted for in survey research. We asked these questions to 1,500 people total. 1,300 of them were women, 200 were men. We included the men so we could say, all right, we can compare women to women, but we can also compare women to men. The whole thinking behind this is to make as holistic of a picture as possible so that we can accurately represent the psychological profile of the American woman. The how took a little bit more work. And my initial trepidation about doing this turned into sheer delight. As my daddy would say, I was a pig in slop for a number of months because I got to go through all of this heady psychological research that I love. I'm a giant nerd. It makes me feel good. So what we did is we went back over 60 years worth of psychological research. The thinking behind this was if we use a traditional marketing research model, we're going to get the same information we've always gotten. And it's not working for us. We need to go and look at women in a different way. In the world of psychology, they've been studying values, personality, and habits for over 60 years. And they're doing this in a way that's trying to tap into this deeper subconscious level. So let's use what has worked in that field. I went back and looked at the best of what was out there in terms of source material, the best journals, the best researchers, and was looking for three things. What did they do? What were the results? And did these things hold over time? When I found those sources that met those three criteria, I kept them in our bundle and just kept building from there. At the end of this investigation, a couple main themes popped out. The number one thing that all of this research did was ask indirect versus direct questions. One of my graduate school professors had this great line where he said, if you ask a direct question and you get a direct answer, it is almost never the truth. In the world of psychology, this is the stuff that psychologists do that drive people nuts because they won't ask you a direct question. They will ask around issues. Well, how do you feel about this? Well, have you looked at it this way? They do all that very intentionally. It's to get to the level of the subconscious layer and to get information out of people from that layer. The next thing that psychologists do, and the next thing that all this research did that worked really well, is they triangulated all of the answers. So you get all of this information from all these direct questions, you come back, triangulate all your answers together, and that gives you a very good read at what's happening at the subconscious level that women can't often articulate. This is the strategy we used in creating all of the questions that we used for the psychological profiling of American women. We got the results back. We all sat down at the table and looked at each other and went, whoa. The whoa came because so much of the ambiguity that we've seen throughout our careers disappeared. And instead, what we were left with was a very clear, easy to understand picture of the psychological profiles of American women. The major takeaway that we had was women were not as complex as we thought they were. And that was a little bit challenging for all of us. It broke a bunch of paradigms, but it's something that we went with, adopted, and have seen great results from doing. All women 18 to 67 years old in the United States fall into one of 5 psychological profiles. The largest of these is our Profile 1, who makes up 26% of the female population in the United States. The smallest of these is Profile 5, with 16% of the total population in the United States. Even if you chose to go after the smallest of our profiles here, that's still 16% of all women 18 to 67 years old in the United States. That is a huge number. And we've seen whole industries set up just to go after one of these psychological profiles. The most important point on the slide, however, is although this model looks similar to other segmentation models that you might have seen before, it is very different. We intentionally created a framework that looked like other segmentation models so everyone would be comfortable with it when we showed it to them. However, underneath of it, it's very different. The whole model is based on 3 things: the subconscious values, personality, and habits of the women in those profiles. It is not built upon demographic information, marital status, employment. All of those things were not factored into the model when we created these profiles. This was strictly based on the subconscious layers that make up the individual woman. All of the demographic information was captured, however, and we have all that by profile. To give you an idea, though, you can easily have a woman of Asian descent that would be somewhere in her 80s with a woman in her 30s from Appalachia that could be in the exact same profile and and have the same underlying set of values, the same underlying personality, and the same underlying habits as each other. It's been a cool thing to see that there can be these differences on the surface that go away completely when you get below that, but it's also a paradigm buster. So it's something to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. This is all this fun psychology stuff that I love to talk about all day long, but we need to make it more real and more visceral. So what we decided to do was to give all of you an example of which you have some familiarity. Let's pretend that you came to us and said, listen, I have a consumer target. I think I know them pretty well. I've got their demographic information. We've done some psychographic work and attitudinal work. Is there anything you can do to help us understand her better? The answer to that would be, yes, we can. The first step we would do is go and take all the information that you have about her so we can understand what you have, and then go and psychologically profile her. If you don't have any of that information, we can jump right into the psychological profiling of her. The way we do that is we have a profiling tool, and the profiling tool is an algorithm. It takes less than a minute for a respondent to go through. It's very accurate. It's one of the highest accuracy rates I've seen, and we can get through a ton of people very quickly in a quantitative sense or even a qualitative sense if you're doing in-person research. In this case, let's pretend we did the profiling, and we found out that your consumer is made up of two different psychological profiles, Profile 1 and Profile 3. Let's start with Profile 1. Profile 1 women are doers. They are achievers. They're very goal-oriented, and they work very hard to make sure that they accomplish what they set out to do. Their need for success drives every area of their lives. That can't be overstated, and we'll go into that in just a second even more. They make up 26% of the entire female population of the United States, 18 to 67 years old. This drive for success is so strong within them that they often are on par with men's drive for success and even above that. We included 3 different items here to help dimensionalize that a little bit, to bring it to life a little bit more. They are far and above the average woman. So typically when we start to present this slide to our clients, they say, well, this sounds like your corporate America type of woman. Is that who she is? The answer is yes and no. There are definitely women that fall into this profile that are in corporate America, and it probably works very well for them. Corporate America is a value system that's very close to the value system that Profile 1 woman has. Her personality fits in with the idea that, you know what, you got to be pretty self-sufficient, and you've got to push things forward. And her habitual tendencies that she has also fit in very well with the idea that you've got to be at work at a certain time, you've got to work through things, and that may mean you have to stay late. All of those complement the system that exists within corporate America. However, if you look at her a little bit more, you can see that 57% of all Profile 1 women are moms. This is higher than all of the other profiles that we have. When you look at this need and drive for success, you can see this come out in her approach to parenting as well. These are women that will sit with their children and say, I want you to be as successful as you possibly can. Let's figure out what we can do to get you there. On the extreme end of this can be the kind of tiger mom phenomena of making sure that your kid is involved in 3 after-school activities, nothing below an A is allowed in your home. Every single performance, every single test has to be done at maximum potential. On the lower end, on the less extreme side, you can have women that say, okay, let's go over what you did in this particular situation. What worked? What didn't? Let's figure out what worked so that you can understand that and use that the next time you go out and get into a similar situation so that we can get you to be as successful as possible. The bottom line to this is these women can draw a straight line from their child success back to their influence. And that gives them a huge emotional payoff. It makes them feel like they are helping to create the success in the lives of their children as well as in their own lives. it's a big deal. Regardless of what end of this big spectrum, tiger mom down to more slow, methodical type of nature, it's all driven by the same underlying tendency to have this drive for success. This drive for success requires that they often have to push or pull others. Doing that can tend to wear her out. One of the ways she can decompress is through shopping. And in terms of her buying behaviors, this is something she really enjoys doing. She tends to be an impulse buyer across all categories, not just fashion as is pictured here, but all categories. And she's willing to pay extra for an image-enhancing benefit. There is a kind of psychological phenomenon that goes behind this. And the idea is, if she can pick up something, let's say this purse that's in this picture, that has the ability to be recognized by somebody else as a sign of success, that plays into a nice feedback loop for her. Someone else is going to see this. They're going to assume she's been successful enough to get something that has this image associated with it. If she's been successful, that means that other people have recognized her successes. She can't be successful without recognition of other people. In addition to that, these people have recognized her and she feels accepted her for what she's been able to accomplish and who she is as a person. Therefore, when she picks up this bag and carries it around, it is a sign to everybody that she's been accepted by her peers. This is something that she's earned. She is worthy of that, and they should also look at her as being worthy of their acceptance as well. It's a very strong emotional pull for her, and you see it in all areas of her retail therapy or in just her normal buying behavior. That gives you an idea of who your theoretical consumer would be. This would be half of them, pretending. Let's look at the other half, the Profile 3 women. Profile 3 women are very different from Profile 1 women. They are extremely predictable. They have strong routines. They have very strong habitual tendencies. And they work to stay away from the parts of life that can cause her to lose equilibrium. She represents 21% of all American women. Instead of being driven by success, Profile 3 women are driven more by purpose. She wants a world that is always in a state of balance and equilibrium. Anything that will throw off that equilibrium is something that she considers to be risky and undesirable. One of the ways to control for the feeling of being out of balance or off kilter is to make very strong routines and very strong habits that take out the potential risks of going out and trying to change something. She finds great comfort in her habits and her routines, and she doesn't want them changed. This can come out as being very controlling at times. If someone comes in and tries to change up her habitual routine, she will resist it. She will first try to avoid it, and if she can't, then she will resist it. And her resistance can be very strong because it feels very dangerous to her to be out of equilibrium. And looking at her and talking to her, she is very clear about her life and what she wants. She's one of the few profiles that can clearly articulate, here's exactly what I want. What she wants is that feeling of equilibrium. She understands the purpose of her life is to try to create these feelings of peace and calm in herself and all of her loved ones as often as she can. She has a very strong belief system that helps to keep her grounded and helps to keep her in that state of equilibrium. And her mission in life is to find those places and things that could knock things off balance and either avoid them or go and take care of them as quickly as she can. Taking this mindset of equilibrium and then looking at how she actually behaves in her real life, you can see that she tends to be, more than any of the other profiles, a woman that stays at home and is a caregiver for her family. Looked at through her lens, this makes a lot of sense. Her home is a place where she can set up habits and routines that nobody else is going to mess with. Nobody's going to come into her home and say, you can't do this anymore, you've got to do it a different way besides her family, and she can probably deal with that much easier than she could having an outsider do it. In addition, because she's got this safe place, this home with these habits and routines that feel very comfortable to her, she can then extend her sphere and look outside of herself to see the areas of life that may be a threat and may knock her or her family out of balance. When she sees those, she can then decide if she is going to avoid them, keep her loved ones away from it, or if she needs to go out and take care of it. She always has a safe home base to come back to, however, and she can go back to that state of balance very quickly as soon as she comes into her home. All of this combined makes sense as to why more of these women are staying at home and managing their household. It helps them, and it also helps their families. This equilibrium also is a major priority for her in terms of her buying behavior. In terms of most of her choices, she will choose the middle-of-the-road option. In terms of fashion, she will choose mainstream fashion over anything that's extreme. Idea, again, is if I can find something that's in the middle of the road, it's not going to cause me to feel uncomfortable, it's not going to draw any attention from anybody else that I don't want, and it's just going to make me feel comfortable. It'll keep that state of equilibrium. 54% of them say they're heavily influenced by low price or bargains. This is a bit of a misleading statistic, and here's why. This is something that you would see in a normal kind of marketing segmentation. And you go, well, she's extremely value conscious, and we're going to have to talk to her about price. Price, in this case, is always put into a value equation. The other end of this value, price divided by risk, always is at the forefront of her consideration. She's going to look at a lower price option and say, okay, number one, does it have a clear expectation of what the experience is going to be like with this thing? Do I know what it's going to do? If she can't figure that out, if she doesn't know what it's going to do, it immediately starts to raise her perception of risk for that product. She'll then go, okay, this price seems within the ballpark or it's way lower. Why? After she does all these computations in her head, the end result can be she might walk away very quickly from something that's a low price because she doesn't know what it's going to do. It seems unfamiliar, it seems potentially risky, and it seems like it can knock her or her loved ones out of that equilibrium that she wants so much. She will pay attention to lower priced things, but it's always under the guise of this value equation with price divided by risk. Last, she loves brands that help her to maintain this equilibrium. When she finds them, she will hold on to them, and she will repeatedly buy them. The issue is, all of us marketers don't like to do that. We always want to change things. Stuff starts to feel stagnant. We need to have a new marketing message out there. We start to push things forward. For her, if she likes a product and you change it, that's very uncomfortable. So this 29% could probably be much higher than this if the world worked closer to her value system. It doesn't. So when she does find a product that is steeped in tradition, that has this very clear value system and is something that doesn't change over time, and it works for her to keep her in this equilibrium state, she will definitely pick it up and she'll definitely continue to use it. So that would give you an idea of what it may look like, these psychological profiles look like. We have whole decks devoted to them, which go into much more information than what we have time to talk about today. All of this, again, is the fun psychology stuff that I love so much, but at the end of the day, you need to see where the rubber meets the road. What can you actually do with this stuff? So what we decided to do is present a case study to all of you. And this is something that we just got finished with, so it's hot off the presses. Our client came to us and said, all right, guys, what we have is we launched a product a couple of years ago. Once we launched it, we put a lot of advertising capital behind it, and it did well. Right now, though, we're having some issues, and they define these issues in 3 different ways. First of all, our sales are going down. Bare minimum, we need to maintain our sales. What we really need is to increase our sales. The next round of advertising that we've created after the initial round that had the lift associated with it hasn't done well, and we don't know why. Last, we're having a lot of trial users, but they're not coming back, and we don't really understand what's happening, what's going on. We took all of the descriptions that they had of their strategic target, of their positioning, and we took all of their creative and analyzed all of it and said, okay, what do we see within this? What values are they talking about? What pieces of personality are they pulling out? And what habits are they trying to honor in what they're doing? We then went and profiled who their strategic target is in terms of their psychological profile, and we also profiled who their current users are to understand the whole gestalt, the whole holistic picture here. What we found were three main things. First, the strategic target and the core user were two different psychological profiles, and this was news to the client. Next, the advertising had a very clear value set that it was talking about, and it had very clear habitual tendencies that it was trying to espouse and build within the consumer. There were some pieces of personality that they were trying to talk about and show within the creative that we were also able to pull out. And looking at that, the values, the personality, and the habits of all the creative did not match up with the values of either the core buyer or the strategic target or the personalities or the habits. It wasn't connecting with anybody. It was just kind of going out into the ether and being lost. Last, when we looked at their positioning was an interesting kind of happenstance exercise. They had created something, positioning-wise, that they wanted to tap into the strategic target. What they'd done instead is they talked about some habitual things as well as some value things that actually work better for the core buyer. So, we came back to them and said, we found these three things. Here's what we have. What we would suggest is really understanding as best as you can your strategic target versus your core buyer, understanding why the creative is not working, and then entertaining some different positioning territories that may work better. They said, great, okay, first step is we've gotten rid of our agency because our creative wasn't doing well. Probably sounds familiar to a lot of you. And we're onboarding another agency. They took the reports and everything that we had and onboarded their agency, telling them this is exactly what you need to know and here's exactly who we're trying to go after with our strategic target. They then said, we're very interested in this positioning territory, this new one. We'd like to test it. So they did. The results showed two major things. Number one, the new positioning territory was unique to the category. Three main things. Unique to the category. It fit with the values, personality, and habits of the strategic target very well. So much so they said, I really like this, and they expressed a higher purchase intent. Last, it also connected with the core buyer. It didn't connect as strongly with the core buyer as it did with the strategic target, but it was enough that the core buyer wasn't going to leave based on a positioning change. They then said, okay, and this just happened. We're now in the state where we need to push forward on this positioning, this new positioning territory, but this is going to take some more internal work to get this moving forward. What we can do is work on the advertising with the train that's already leaving the station. So they've begun to tweak the new advertising campaign to fit with the core values, personality, and habits of the strategic target to bring her into the fold and keep her within the brand. I'm now going to turn it back over to Tanisha for her to take you through some tips.
So as Chad mentioned, we've got a lot more detail on these profiles than we could possibly present in 45 minutes or so. What's really interesting, I think, for us, having been on both the client and supplier side, and me mostly on the client side for the majority of my career, is to see this information and to realize how much I was missing. The puzzle was not completely put together. I had no real clear understanding of the consumer target until I started to see this information. And I say that to say that I'm a smart researcher, as are most of the people on this call. We are all really good at what we do, but the reality of it is there are things that we don't know about our consumers. There are things that we often don't have the time to explore and get to know about our consumers, and that was really what propelled us to do this work and this research. We want to help make our marketers more effective, more efficient. A lot of this stuff seems kind of common sense when you hear it, but it's really difficult to get at with traditional research approaches. So we also wanted to leave you with a few tips on how to think about marketing to women and how you connect or maybe don't connect with your consumer. So the way we like to think of it is ask yourself, what kind of relationship have you cultivated with your consumers or your customers? In other words, if this is your female target, what would a dating expert say about your relationship? How would they describe the level of intimacy you have? Would they say you really know her, or would they say you're just kind of judging her based on what she looks like on the outside? And for those of us who've dated, we all kind of have fallen into that pitfall. There's a lot more than meets the eye when you meet somebody, and we want you to get to know her beyond the surface. What are your shared values? What connects you to her? Something more than product features and benefits. We've talked to so many clients who can espouse on and on about the features and benefits of their products and their technology, etc., but it doesn't mean anything if you haven't figured out how to say it in a way that's meaningful to the target. So we want you to be able to translate what you do into something that is meaningful to her. And the next question we want you to ask yourself is, do I know how to talk to her? Can I communicate to her in a way that connects and gets the right response? And that right response can range from buy me to stay with me. You want her to respond the way you need her to in order for you to be a successful marketer. And then lastly, what else does she want from you? What else does she need from you? If there are other competitors encroaching on your space, what reassurance does she need from you that she's okay with you? What innovation opportunities exist for you to better deliver more value to her? Ask yourselves these questions. And don't forget that our brains are a little tricky. We talked about the heart of our work was really built on years of psychological research. We really believe that there's a lot that women can't or won't communicate, not easily anyway. So we want you to think about how to harvest the best from her. We do a lot of qualitative research here, and we want people to think about what's the right forum for discussion with her. Is it one-on-one? Is it a group? Is it something else? It's also hard for her to put her mind around the right words. So give her some, fill in the blanks. Give her some ideas to start with. Help her figure out how to coalesce her thoughts into a simple statement. And the third point is leverage insights from open-ended survey questions. A lot of times in quantitative research, because of the cost and labor involved with open-ended questions, we often either don't ask very many or we don't really do a whole lot with the data that we get out of those. But we really truly believe that a lot of the insight can be in those open-ended questions. That's when she has the forum to tell you what she really thinks without your guiding and your leading. The last point is give her some time to coalesce her thoughts. It may take a minute for her to really think through exactly how to articulate what her perspective or reaction was. So we believe wholeheartedly in online interviews that take several days or giving people homework so that they have a little bit of a time to formulate their response. Give her time to kind of work through how she would describe how she feels about certain things without a whole lot of poking and prodding her along the way. We hope that you remember, if nothing else, from this presentation that women are more than the stereotypes that we might ascribe to them based on what they look like on the outside or what their income is or what their marital status is. Not all moms are created equal. Not all young women are the same. Not all old women are the same. We want you to remember that women are more than any title or demographic you might assign to them. And if you want to know more about us and the work that we do and how we might be able to help you, we've got on the screen Tracy Poxis is our client development person. You can reach out to her at tracy@insightsandmarketing.com or go straight to our website, insightsandmarketing.com. So now we're going to open it up for questions, but we want to thank you for taking the time so far, and we look forward to hopefully answering some of your questions.
All right, so let's move to one of the several audience questions that we have. First, is it possible to get to this level of insight via traditional research approaches?
It's really difficult. What happens is you can get there, but you end up having to do what we call re-looping. So you might make a little progress in one round of qualitative. You might have to go back to another round of qualitative, and you might have to then do a survey step. So you can probably get there if you keep probing enough. The problem is that's an incredibly inefficient process when you think about the time and the dollars that are associated with it. So we tend to tell people, if you want to get there the shortest route possible, the psychological profiles can get you there. And they can get you there in a more complete way.
It's not a building process. Most research is a main building process that you go through and keep building on the information that you have. The issue with that is if you get off any piece of the research, you start to build on a weak foundation that can lead you astray. What we've done is tried to start at the very beginning. What really drives the behavior, what's beneath the surface, and then use that at every stage after to filter everything through that. It gives you a nice way to say, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're trying to aim for, instead of trying to discover that through rounds and rounds of research.
Okay, and our next question, can I integrate these insights with my current consumer segmentation?
Absolutely. We talk about the profiles not necessarily as a segmentation, but as insight into who your consumer is. And if you have a segmentation, it would be really easy to profile your consumers and understand exactly which segments have what psychological profiles. So I'll give you a really fair example. If you have a health-oriented survey and it's based on maybe activity level and you have people who are highly active, we can look at your highly active consumers and say, you know what, they fall mostly into these three psychological profiles. Here's what makes those profiles similar. Here's what makes them different. And here are the implications for how you might want to communicate to your active, highly active consumers.
There's always a bridge. You can always communicate between profiles. There's always something. However, they are distinct from one another. So you have to know both the similarities and the differences. It gives you very nice guardrails to say, okay, here's the territory where it's going to work, and here's the stuff that we really can't do. If we do that, we're going to lose part of our audience and part of our target.
All right, and our next question. The case study showed how this approach can help with positioning and advertising, but how can this be leveraged for product innovation?
Actually, you know what, innovation I think is probably the sweet spot for this, because you start from a place of kind of a blank slate of what I like to call a tabula rasa. So it really gives you a foundation for understanding what are the real options, and we do this a lot with clients for your innovation. So say you are producing a widget that vibrates. What are the real benefits of that widget? What can you say about that widget? What does this technology functionally enable people to do? We then try to look at, okay, based on those functional benefits, emotionally you might go to these territories, and these territories would really resonate with these people. So you really start to connect what you're trying to do from a product standpoint to who cares about it early on in the process. And to Chad's point, you develop your ideas fully knowing not only what you need to develop, but who you're developing to appeal to. So that's ideally how the process would work, in contrast to how it often works, which is we develop this vibrating widget, and now we've got to figure out who's going to buy it. And then you keep testing to try to figure out who likes it without really ever knowing if this is going to appeal to a large enough group of people. You'll know that early on with the profile stuff.
Okay, and our next audience question. Have you tried this approach in healthcare or with B2B customers?
Yes, to both. And the idea is, regardless of what category you're looking at, women are women. They're going to have these same underlying values, personality, and habits, regardless of who we're trying to talk to, whether she is a CEO, whether she's a stay-at-home mom, whether she's a healthcare consumer or not. What we want to start off with is that very bottom line subconscious information and then build from there. We've done healthcare and understanding how patients are interacting, what they want from the system. We've also done it in B2B work to understand, okay, if you're going to go and try to sell to your client, who are you trying to sell to? If you have a female potential customer on the other end of your line or in your in-person meeting, What do you need to know to communicate to her effectively? What is she really going to connect with? How is she going to resonate to your message? And what can you do to fix your message to better speak to her and what she really values?
And one add to that, and I'd like for the folks on the phone to be aware, we start with her and then think of your category through what matters to her. Oftentimes the process starts with, I am in this business, my business is this, I sell this type of product, therefore now who do I go fish for? We try to bring her a little bit further upstream in the process and say, you're selling this, she needs this, here's where the match is made, i.e. dating, and this is where perfect harmony exists, this is where your values match her values, and so then you move forward thinking about your brand and your category through the lens of what she needs, what matters to her. That doesn't mean that you forsake any internal needs. It just means that you have a more crisp idea and understanding of who matters to you. And I liken it to a relationship on purpose, because if, for those of you who are on the phone who are married or in some kind of relationship, you understand that the best gift that your partner can give you is a gift that shows that they know who you are and what matters to you. And if you think about the business you're in and the products and services that you sell through the lines of, this is a gift to the person who I am trying to attract, you tend to see it a little bit more differently. You tend to see things more crisply. You tend to be more focused, and you want to deliver something that's meaningful to your target because you want that person to be receptive and to reward you for the gift that you've given them.
Most of the frustration that I've seen, and I've been on the supplier side my entire career, most of the frustration I've seen on the client side comes from the belief that they understand the consumer. They create something using that understanding, they show it to the consumer, and it doesn't work. They don't know why. And it makes them really frustrated because it's this, you told me you wanted this, I created it, I gave it to you, and now you're telling me you don't like it? What's going on? The idea is to try to get past that surface layer where someone is really just talking to you, telling you what they want, and instead understand what lies beneath the surface, what she really is about at her individual core, and then build out from that so that you can get around all of these re-looping and all of this innovation that tends to not go anywhere. It just doesn't work as well as you had hoped, and get past the frustration.
Okay, and moving on to our next audience question. How do you define values and personality?
Values, these come straight out of the literature. There's a variety of different definitions for the values. The one that we focused on was they are universal standards that are found across all different varieties and all different cultures. The specific kind of values that we used in our research were across 32 different countries, and they've been studied for years and years and years. The thinking behind them is we are able to distill them down to a specific number of values that we can thoroughly understand, and we also understand how those values are interrelated. They are the subconscious drivers of behavior. Personality, the one that we used within our studies, which is the psychology part of it, was the Big Five personality measures. They're the ones that have been used over and over again in research, and there's a ton of supplementary research that's been done with them, especially within the consumer realm, to understand how they relate to buying behaviors, how they relate as well to values. There's some cross between those. So the personality are these ingrained tendencies that people have. Oftentimes, from what we can see in the literature, they seem to be born with them, and they continue throughout your life. There are these places that you go to, they're the underlying tendencies of your behavior and your preferences that you carry with you, and regardless of what situation you find yourself in.
Okay, and next question. Where can we find more information on the study and the other profiles not included in the presentation?
Probably the best way is to reach out to Tracy, as listed on the screen, or go directly to our website. We'd be happy to share that information with you.
Okay. And our next question. One of the challenges with psychological segmentation is the marketing teams and media planners have a hard time translating it to where to place their messaging to best reach those groups. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, This is not a tool intended to help with media planning per se, but what I will tell you is because we're able to pair our psychological profiles with secondary data like MRI, it's really, really helpful at kind of pinpointing things. We also know enough about these women's habits to be able to tell you who's more social and who's less social, who's more traditional in terms of their media consumption. So, for example, Chad mentioned Profile 1 and walked you through a brief overview of Profile 1, and he also talked about Profile 3. Those two have very different social media habits. Profile 1 is very heavy LinkedIn. Profile 3 could care less about LinkedIn, and you're more likely to find her on things like Pinterest, for example. So we can give you some ideas of how to navigate, but we can't help you build a media plan. We can only give you guidance on what media she's likely to consume.
All right, moving on. Have you repeated this on a global level? Cultural nuances may have different implications country to country.
Go ahead, Chad.
One of the things that I was concerned with was exactly that. We started off doing this in the United States only as kind of a pilot. I mean, to be honest, to see if this really worked, it did. When we were putting together the measures that we used, I was extremely sensitive to the fact that cultural differences may have an effect on the results that you get. What I strove to do, I think that's a word, strove, what I tried to do very hard was to make sure that every single question we have in our battery of questions is something that has been tested across borders. This is something that we know generalizes to cultures at large outside of just the United States. It's done very intentionally, so if we got to the next round, the next piece of this, and we wanted to do this on a global scale, we had something that would work to do that. So it's kind of over-engineering it, but it was definitely a part of the consideration set. We went in to develop the actual questions that we used for the profiling.
And I will say that we're planning on fielding the next round of this research to get a deeper understanding of women in a more holistic way. We'll add more depth to the survey this time around, and we'll probably include some other demographic groups just to make sure we're measuring maybe men more effectively, et cetera. But we have had some discussion about global, using this to type women around the globe. We think there's a lot of applicability to what exists here. The question is, based on development of that country, how likely are things to change in terms of sizes of segments, if you will.
The underlying values, personality, habits, based on all the literature that I've been able to find, should stay the same. If they vary, they vary very, very slightly. The idea, though, of the culture affecting the size, the segments, that is something to always keep in mind.
All right, we have time for one more question. Have you done similar research on male buyers and found similar surprises?
We included men in this study, and one of the things we'd like to do in the next round of research is include a more robust sample of men, because we want to understand how their personalities, values, and habits might float similarly or different from women. We had, like Chad mentioned before, 200 men in this survey, and what's amazing is, like I said, there are a lot of similarities between men in some profiles and quite a number of differences between them and other profiles. So we look forward to seeing how that could float out across a full segmentation or profiling of men.
Again, the idea when these measures were initially created is it should work for men as well as women. This should work for everybody, was the major focus. We focused solely on women for our business needs and what we needed to do. But all of the measures that we have should work just as well for men as they do for women. We did not psychologically profile the men that were in our sample. We used them more as a comparison, but it's something I would absolutely love to do and look forward to doing in the future.
Spoken like a true man.
Yes. I'm the only dude in a whole division of women, and I work at a primarily female company, and I've got a wife and 2 daughters at home, and a female dog and a female cat. I'm completely entrenched in the world of women, and it would be nice every now and again to see a man and talk to him too.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're all out of time. I'd like to thank Tanisha, Chad, Insights in Marketing, and all of you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we'll be sending you a link to the archived version shortly. If you have any further questions or want further information, please visit the Insights in Marketing website at www.insightsinmarketing.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the webinar for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your line.